All right. Looks like everybody's online. So, hey everyone, welcome to today's webinar, What's the right CDN for you in 2026? Today, you will learn how to objectively benchmark your CDN and the other vendors in the space so you can make the right decision to improve your website's performance. You're also going to learn which key performance metrics actually drive success and business impact. So, over the next 30 minutes, you're going to learn directly from our panel of Fastly experts along with our special guests from SpeedCurve. And you stay till the very end of our webinar, you'll learn how to get your own custom website performance report with the click of a button. So just stick around. We'll have that for you as well as a special offer from SpeedCurve. And with that, I'm going to pass it over to our fantastic speakers for the day. Omid, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, George, and good morning, everybody. Omid Nasrati, I'm Fastly's Field CTO for the Americas. I've been at Fastly since 2013 and care very deeply about web performance. Obviously, it's why we're here. I'll pass it over to Steve.
Yeah, thanks, Omid. Hey, everybody. Steve Steerer here. Been at Fastly for just under a year now, running our sales engineering team for North America. Based in Boston, but in terms of web performance, just like Omid, completely obsessed with this space for end user experience. Been working in it for about 20 years, I'd say, and really excited to go through some of the conversations today. So I'll pass it over to Leon.
Hi there, Leon Brockhart. I'm Solutions Architect at Fastly. I've been here 10 years, and in that time, I must say I'm really obsessed about web performance. I'm super impatient, and I hope everything is fast. Go ahead, Cliff.
Nice. Thank you. Cliff Crocker from SpeedCurve. I'm the Chief Product Officer. I've been with SpeedCurve for about 6 years, but been friends with SpeedCurve since it started. Been doing web performance in some form or the other for about the last 20 years, both from the measurement side and vendor side in terms of performance measurement, as well as the acceleration side in terms of CDN, and now back to real user measurement and performance at SpeedCurve. I am, obviously obsessed with performance, but it's also it's how I make my living. It's what I talk about every day, and I continue to be just as excited about it as the first day that I started. And on to my colleague and mentor, Tammy. I threw that in.
Hi, you made me laugh. My name is Tammy Everts. I am Chief Experience Officer at SpeedCurve. I've been at SpeedCurve for about 8.5 years. I've been doing performance work for about twice that. My background is actually in user experience and usability testing. So I'm just sort of obsessed with not just performance, but how it intersects with how people engage with websites and web properties and how that affects business. So that's been the focus of my research for the past 15 plus years. And I'm just super excited to be doing a webinar with all you folks from Fastly, as well, of course, as my mentor, Cliff. So I've been a big fan of Fastly since the beginning, and yeah, just happy to be here.
Fantastic. I think, as we start to talk about this conversation, maybe it's good to sort of level set on why. Why does performance matter? Why do we think it matters? And it wouldn't be a webinar with SpeedCurve if we didn't talk about the fact that really what it comes down to is there's huge business impact when it comes to performance, not just on, users' perceived performance, but also on things like conversion rates and things like bounce rates and just brand recognition and the rest. We've been doing a lot of work in this for a while, Tammy. Tammy actually shepherds the WPO stats site, which is a collection of some great case studies that's out there that are available for everybody, that are really centered around this topic and why it matters.
Yeah, the research kind of goes back really far. So in an ideal world, every site does A/B testing on, changes they made to their pages and different variants of their pages to measure the impact of, making various changes on page speed for the same page and what impact that has on business metrics like conversion rate and bounce rate, as Cliff said. And this actually kind of goes way back to kind of the early days, like one of the earliest case studies that I remember reading about that got me really excited and actually changed the way that we talk about performance beyond performance metrics was way back when Cliff was at Walmart Labs, and we didn't even know each other then, and did kind of a released some groundbreaking data that used something that we've kind of run with at SpeedCurve called correlation charts to show how users can how conversion rate is affected by various speeds of the session. So this is an example of a correlation chart that we make them available in SpeedCurve to customers. So this is showing one of the Google Core Web Vitals, largest contentful paint, which measures when visible, important, meaningful content is rendered in the browser. And what's interesting about this correlation chart is for those folks who might be familiar with largest contentful paint as a core web vital, is that the recommended good threshold for LCP is 2.5 seconds. What this correlation chart shows is the distribution of all the sessions and from 0.5 seconds all the way out to 4.5 seconds and beyond. Those are those gold bars. And then the conversion rate is that blue line that I hope you can see. And what's interesting about this correlation chart is that it shows that luckily most of the users are getting a fast experience. That's why you get all those tall bars on the left side of the chart. But the peak conversion rate, 6.2%, happens at the 1.1 second LCP mark. And if you're able to read the really tiny little number stamps at the bottom, at 2.5 seconds, which is the Google threshold, and this isn't Google's fault. I mean, every site is different. But at 2.5 seconds, that's when you kind of hit something that we call the performance plateau. And I think we have another chart that we kind of shows where the performance plateau is. There we go. So yeah, at around 2.5, 2.8 seconds, things start to kind of level out. So what the correlation chart's meant to show you is that as sessions get faster, conversion rate typically increases, and where this peak happens can really vary from site to site.
Yeah, and I think this is exactly how we illustrated this way back in 2012 or whatever it was, really dating myself, but and why this is still so important. At that time, the metric was just front end time. We didn't have all these, fancy metrics like LCP and IMP and CLS and everything else, but just front end time, everything except for time to first byte, network, and all that. And we saw this correlation and just started to realize that, hey, up until this point, sites like Walmart and Amazon and others had really been concerned more about, is the site up? Are we staying up over Black Friday? Like, are we actually able to transact? In Walmart's case, it was like, hey, we're the low cost leader. People aren't going to go elsewhere and pay more for a product. And this really disproved that theory to show that there is opportunity here to be able to shift these users left and maximize conversion more than anything else that we can really demonstrate when it comes to building out features on the site. So that was why this was kind of so transformative, not just in terms of, Walmart's business and other people's business, but also in the fact that people needed to start looking and see how this looked for their own data. Because while we do see this similar pattern, it's going to be different based on your site, your users, your customers that are out there. But metrics don't always correlate. So when we have this here to talk a little bit more about that. Tammy, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more to this slide or if you want me to, but
Well, I think this was actually research that you did, Cliff. So yeah, go
yeah,
ahead.
totally. It is. That's right. Um, so uh, metrics are great, and what I really love about Core Web Vitals is that the speed metrics team at Google has been very open and transparent about the fact that they are open to changing these metrics based on the input that they get and as they learn more about the metric. Early on in Core Web Vitals, they introduced a metric called first input delay. And we and others did a lot of analysis to say, is this really a good metric? What we were finding is that essentially we weren't seeing a whole lot of movement in FID. We were seeing that people were meeting it. It was really pretty low, and it wasn't necessarily indicative of that responsiveness that it was intended to represent. So here's a chart that's showing a metric that does not correlate with business metrics. There really wasn't any proof that this was actually having an input on user experience. So while it might have been a core web vital and important to try to optimize, we really weren't seeing that it was actually going to be proving out in terms of more revenue, more business. And to everyone's credit in the community, we then switched this metric to something now that is called interaction to next paint, which we find correlates much more closely and really looks more at that user experience in terms of responsiveness and all the impact that JavaScript execution is having on the browser when the main thread is actually occupied. So these are good to also disprove the fact that, not all metrics are necessarily created equal. And I think really what it comes down to is that at SpeedCurve, and I think in the industry, our recommendation is really more about focusing on the importance of user experience versus, some of these different metrics that are out there that are really maybe just focused more on, looking at the network activity or looking at, other metrics that are maybe related to page load that don't really reflect what's going on and what's really perceived by that user.
There's some other research that I've done in the past around user experience of things that are a little bit harder to track. For example, what a slow experience does to things like brand perception and whether or not people will return to your site. So when I've in other studies that I've done, there's not just a loss to conversions if your pages are slow. People are less likely to return to your site. People are less likely to even just like your brand. So there's kind of a bit of a long-term effect. And in fact, not research that I did, but research by a group called TRAC, TRAC, found that actually, like Cliff mentioned, downtime or outages, which kind of are the thing that I mean, we've all been talking about AWS and everything that went on there not that long ago. And but actually, downtime definitely hurts your business, but slow time can actually have twice the impact on revenue that downtime does. It just, somebody made the analogy that downtime is kind of like your house is on fire and it's an emergency and everybody notices, whereas slow time is like you've got a carbon monoxide leak and you just, you die in your bed. Bit of a grisly metaphor, but not mine. But if it gets people's attention, I'm willing to use it.
There you go. Absolutely. And I think we can transition a little bit more into a customer story from Fastly that talks a little bit more, kind of demonstrates a little bit more about what we're talking about. I think that's you, Steve.
Yeah, I'll get right into it, Cliff and Tammy. Thanks for teeing this up. This was great content. Now, I think for today, we did want to kind of dive a little bit deeper on Dunelm, which for folks on the call might not have heard of that brand if you're not shopping in the UK. But in the UK, they are a large home furnishing retailer, and as we'll show later, one of the fastest out there, which is great. But I think roughly, I'd say a year and a half ago, they started working with us because their previous platform was at the end of the day stifling them from doing what they needed to focus on. And some of those areas which might resonate with folks is like, listen, they were living in a world of like making the end user experience as innovative and fast as possible. And in the world of all the metrics and the changes in the industry and things of how to look at the end user experience, they needed a platform that was going to get them to the latest and best experience. So that was one piece. There is a note on security for sure. That was another focus area for them. We won't dive too deep in that one, but knowing that security was a focus and that they can achieve security without sacrificing on the performance angle was definitely a great way for us to partner with them. And also for their unique case of the DevSecOps with infrastructure as code, this team was constantly innovating and deploying, and their previous provider was actually preventing them to keep up with the innovation they were driving in-house. So those are kind of the three areas that they were focused on in terms of experiences, a security angle, and more agile deployments. So from coming to work with us and working with our CDN and our WAF and working with our serverless compute, working with the Terraform to plug into their configuration deployment, and the big kind of benefit that they got that I don't think they were expecting was, we're providing them 100% real-time logs. That was
Yeah.
streaming into their own SIM, right? So we all probably have a SIM of our choice, whether it's, Datadog or Splunk or you name it across the board. They were using it for digesting, not just from a web performance and triaging, but just looking for other observability angles to shore up their environment. So there was actually the instant logging that was helping them along their path as well. and really give their customers that consistent and secure experience. So, a quick just note, because we're tying into the web performance and the experience that we're trying to provide for our end users. Stats don't lie. Stats to publish. Stats probably partly validated a little bit by Tammy, but this customer was sometimes experiencing about over 900% faster homepage load speeds. Might sound like unreasonable number to achieve, but this is what this customer has reported to us that they were getting for getting onto our platform. Their basket performance, their checkout, they're highly prized getting the customers to transact. They're seeing 23% higher on the basket performance side. Their deployments of actually being agile and being innovative and pushing out changes to their platform, they saw a 200x increase. And all at the same time, like I said before, like their security leveled up at the same time, which was great. Now, the one thing that's really interesting about this, because we've all kind of worked with doing migrations or changing things out there for our end users and customers for their experience, we had a little snafu when we were actually bringing them onto the platform where their application, I won't say which provider that they were on, actually had an issue with their product listing pages. So they were having some issues with the products being showcased. So we had to move really fast. And so by the time we got their DNS cut over to get the 100% of their traffic, once the changes hit, they saw this performance impact immediately. And also we were able to actually help resolve the fact that they were having issues like showcasing some of those images to their end users. So we were able to validate that across the board. In terms of like kind of business impact, we could talk about conversion rate for sure. We could talk about the web performance metrics that they're looking at, but at the end of the day, this customer was achieving on all fronts, especially when the innovative side is that now they are actually, and Tammy, this to hopefully tee you up on what we're able to showcase here on the performance side, but also they're actually doing this with a 200x improvement in how they're innovating to even drive their experiences further, which is exactly what they were looking for. So a great kind of onboarding that we were able to kind of go through. And I think Tammy, I'll kind of let you showcase where Dunelm falls into the use cases here.
Yeah, so this is kind of one of the fun things that we can do is that whenever you've done a big project like this where you think you made a lot of improvement and you want to see where you sit relative to your competitors, which is really, really compelling, especially if you want to impress the folks who give raises and give you more budget, then you can benchmark your site against your competitors. So in this case, we just added Dunelm to our competitive benchmarking dashboard for EU and UK retail. And you can see, so it's a kind of doing them a bit of a disservice because this list is semi-alphabetized. They actually tied with Amazon, but because it starts with a D, it's second in the list. So yeah, you can see that they're the second. I hope you can see that they are the second film strip in this benchmarking dashboard, and that they have a start render that is around 1 second, which is, oh, sorry, it's an LCP time. My apologies. That is around 1 second, which is blazing fast. That's wonderful. So yeah, couldn't be happier to see results like that.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tammy, for pulling that together and showcasing where they stand amongst their peers. So I think
Yeah,
kind
my
of
pleasure.
to summarize, like, in terms of the Dunelm use case tying into the web performance and the impact that this customer was concerned about, was great to showcase. And I think Leon, you're going to take us a little bit deeper on just the metrics that you tend to find that customers care about.
Absolutely. So we've heard a lot about different three-letter acronym metrics, and we've had different metrics in the last decade. Some are retired, some may be up and coming, but I'm going to talk about my favorite, which is the largest contentful paint. So LCP. We've seen that already in some of the slides today. And I'm going to take this acronym backwards. So a paint is something that is displayed on the screen by the browser. Um, Typically like a piece of text, a paragraph, an image, the first frame of video, something like that. Contentful means it has to have like it can't just be a black image. It can't just be a wide blue screen. It has to have something interesting for the user to see on it. So you can see that already there might be some interesting ways people might have tried to gain this metric in the past, right? And largest means there will be paints will be different things will be painted while you're loading a page, and this will be the largest thing that is painted on the page. And so the aim of this metric is to represent the most important thing that a user would see when loading the page. Um, it's does this pretty well, but it's a heuristic. There's a number of ways that you might be able to improve any particular metrics on this. And one of the ways is to, I like this, is to fetch earlier. So to give the browser lots of extra information, like this image here, for example, is the product image. It's the hero image. We're going to want to load this as quickly as possible. So you might want to pro increase the fetch priority, for example, or set like a pre-connect or a preload. Or I like the other way I like to say is you can load less. So instead of having all this uncompressed or high resolution images, using the latest compression protocols or the latest image optimization tools, you can get exactly the same content, looks exactly the same, but it's much smaller and thus loads faster. But I'm sure many of you may have your favorite metrics or even some tips about LCP.
One of
Um,
the things, sorry, just to interject for a minute, I find it amazing how many sites that I look at that are lazy loading their LCP image. Like, and this has just kind of been one of those things where I mean, it's kind of a forehead slap, but it's also like, hey, this has actually been built in. It's sort of like we've talked about lazy loading as like a performance optimization for so many years. So like now you're telling me not to do that. And yes, that's exactly the case. So if you're lazy loading your LCP image, obviously a quick and easy fix to do that, and just don't do that. It's super bad.
yeah, absolutely. I always see that as like we'll lazy load all the images,
Yep.
including the most important one. It's like maybe not. Um, um, I don't know. Is there any more tips about LCP?
I think we could go on and on. I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about more was like, what contributes to LCP? What are some of those things that you can look for? Obviously, lazy loading, that's one example. Don't do that. That's bad. But there's other things too. It could be a factor of time to first byte. Time to first byte to me is still a great metric. It's not necessarily the user focused metric that we want to look at and center around, but in terms of how it may delay LCP, big one there. So look at your time to first byte. And then also there are subparts to LCP. So we've done a great job in terms of breaking this down even further around attribution around this metric. So looking at resource load delay, looking at the load duration of the image itself. A lot of these things key to what Leon was talking about earlier in terms of how you optimize these things. And then also, just the render delay. So I think there's some really good resources that are available to you, especially in RUM data, to be able to give you an idea of where this is happening. We talk a lot about sort of that critical rendering path within a page or an application. And Tammy's really, big on really focusing on, what's happening within a waterfall up until you get to LCP. What are all those elements? Like, is there blocking JavaScript or JavaScript that's not being loaded synchronously? Do you have other lower priority images that are loading before your LCP image? A really good way to kind of optimize that and simplify what you're looking at, especially this day and age when pages tend to have a lot of resources. So I think focusing on those things in the critical rendering path are super key. Other things
And
that
I
I
think
like, and just to plug this because I'm a big advocate of it, getting in the black box of time to first byte. The W3C Performance Working Group has it introduced something called server timing headers a while back. I think it was 2012. Server timing headers are great because we can get a little bit more exposure to what's happening on that initial request or that initial round trip. So CDNs have this ability to expose things like time on edge or time to origin, even exposing cache hit if that's occurring. So you can get much more granular. The point is starting at the user experience and then working back to what are those things that are contributing. But server timing is one of those that I really promote and really look at heavily, especially when you're benchmarking CDNs. The proof is in the pudding there when it comes to latency.
I was just going to add to that, just thinking of the critical rendering path is, we have so many sites, especially retail sites, being built on frameworks or in, platforms like Shopify and Wix and so on. And it's really easy for people who are not developers, engineers, people who don't understand, what adding things to a page can do to performance, especially pushing out LCP. And I recently did an analysis of a retail page, a landing page where they had so many plugins and so on that basically all were loading before the LCP element. And the LCP element was something like the 400th element on the page that was called on a page that had about 600 elements. So it's just really easy for that to be just this invisible problem that nobody sees and therefore nobody can take responsibility for.
Yeah, 100%.
I particularly like how the largest contentful element could be different depending upon mobile, upon
Yeah.
a desktop, and even like the speed of your connection, I guess, right?
Yeah.
So having these RAM tools identify what the user is actually seeing as this critical metric, I think that's super important.
Mhm.
So kind of circling around like the methodologies for measuring this stuff, like when we're talking about these different metrics, primarily we're really focused on two things, and we've given some demonstrations of that already. One is synthetic monitoring or really yeah, active monitoring, where you're going out telling an agent what you want it to hit. Here's the URL or here's the script that I want to actually step through this transaction flow. Synthetic data is amazing. It's awesome. I've been working with synthetic data for 20 years. Really focuses on allowing you to do things like getting deeper diagnostics, being able to actually benchmark across CDNs, being able to override DNS and actually do a bake-off if you want between different CDN providers. The ability to kind of have like more repeatable scenarios that you can baseline against, to know like as we're doing deploys, are we making things better or worse? Also providing great things like the film strips we saw earlier in the industry benchmarks, being able to see visually what are my users experiencing. So synthetic is tremendous for that. Not just that, but also benchmarking against your competitors, which you can't do with real user monitoring, which is really the other area we've been talking about. The importance of real user monitoring, I can't emphasize enough, just because to me, really what the users are perceiving is really the only thing that I care about when we're looking at the distribution of performance. So RUM is incredible for that, incredible for being able to actually go back and correlate back with business results, like we gave some examples of earlier. Being able to actually go and see, well, okay, we can't measure everything synthetically, so what are people seeing across the globe? You've got a lot of global brands at Fastly. What's that experience like from location to location? So can't emphasize enough the importance of having both of these methodologies when you're looking at performance. And a third, which I'll let Amit get into a little bit more, is something that a lot of people might not be aware of, which is the Chrome User Experience Report or the Crux data set. So I'll go ahead and pass it off to you to talk a little bit more about that, Amit.
Thanks, Cliff. Let me just get my slides up real quick. And I would come over the top with the advocating intensely for the granularity of the data set that you guys provide. When we built Fastly, we built it to be the fastest, most optimized CDN on modern network topology as we could. But a lot of our customers were honestly flying blind relative to the rich amount of data that they have today. So having a tool like Speed Curve at your side to help you dive into both correlation and where we can do better in terms of actual web performance, a huge boon to our customers. So yeah, I want to reiterate the appreciation. So to Cliff's point, we wanted to give you guys a little bit of a sense or a legend for where folks are seeing performance gains relative to the other CDNs that are out there. It should come as no surprise. We built ourselves from the ground up to be as fast as possible from a server architecture perspective, from a network architecture perspective, and bearing in mind that all of the CDNs are reverse proxies, meaning that we need to see the request at the edge before we have a cached version of the response ready for any subsequent request. That's a key important point that influenced the way that we built out our services and do our capital expansion. So what this shows you is across all of the origins sitting in front of each of the CDNs, how are we competing with each other? How are we comparing with each other on lowest contentful paint? We're very proud to show this. I mean, these metrics fluctuate within standard deviations over time, but generally speaking, Fastly tends to be the fastest in terms of LCP. Same for, as Leon mentioned earlier, time to first byte. We talked about how there are a lot of different metrics that build into the main heuristic LCP. Time to first byte being a really good indicator of network performance in addition to server data that Cliff mentioned. So to break it down visually for you all, we just went across Akamai, Cloudflare, and CloudFront. I think those are basically the extant CDNs of relevance today. So regionally, on time to first byte, which builds into lowest contentful paint versus Akamai. Green equals faster. And I won't spend too much time on each of these, but you get a visual sense of what our customers are seeing. On lowest contentful paint, also looking really good. And again, these metrics fluctuate over time. This is most recent data based off of Chrome user experience, Crux. We like to use Google as kind of a reference point because, shoot, everyone's really surfing the web on Google. Against Cloudflare, again, pretty much the same thing. The one thing I'll note is Cloudflare is faster in China, and that is because they have POPs in China. Everywhere else in the world, you see Fastly dominating on performance. And then lastly, CloudFront. So this one is interesting for me because CloudFront is AWS. They have the ubiquity, they have a backbone, they have network everywhere. And yet we see performance gains relative to them when switching to Fastly. Um, yeah, green across the board pretty much except for China. So if that's an important one, just in the spirit of being agnostic and providing consult, if China is a very important performance region for you, I would implore you all to do a bake-off. But just based off of the Crux data, that's what we see. All
Just a
right.
note on Crux data, just to be transparent about sort of how we think about it in the performance community, it's an amazing free open data set that can be used, and it kind of combines some of the best of both when you look at synthetic, being able to benchmark competitors versus and but still do that with real user data. Fantastic for that. But at the same time, there's still some caveats. While we love Chrome and while we love Google, there's a little bit of a black hole when you talk about mobile, specifically iOS and support for that. So that's one of the things that just to know when you're looking at that Crux data for data like this, where you're benchmarking CDNs and looking more at kind of like time to first byte or other things and latency, probably really not as relevant. When you're looking at user experience, however, we've had a little bit of a black hole when it comes to Safari and iOS because they're not supporting Core Web Vitals. However, to give them huge props, we're very, very excited to see that LCP as well as INP, both in tech preview for Safari. So really, really encouraging. And thanks so much to that WebKit team over there at Apple for jumping on this and providing us more visibility. So shout out to them.
All right, so that's going to bring us to the end of our webinar. We have a couple of free things we want to share with you guys. So on the screen, what you see today, what you see here is a performance report of one of the largest online retailers that generates over $2.5 billion per year in revenue. And they drive over 60 million visitors per month to this website. So this is actually Google Crux data showing the LCP performance metrics for their website from 2023 to 2025. So every single row here represents a single month. And if you look at the green bars, it's showing the percentage of website visitors who experience a good LCP. And that threshold for good LCP is defined by Google. So on the bottom rows, if you look at the end of 2023 to the beginning of 2024, you see only around 57% of users experience a good LCP. And then in a few months, there's this sudden jump, a really quick jump to 77, 78% of users experiencing a good LCP. So what happened here? So in February of 2024, this is actually one of Fastly's customers. They switched from a different CDN vendor to Fastly, as well as implementing some best practices from our performance experts. And then they not only experienced it pretty quickly, but they've retained it over the last year and a half. So again, this is all public data from Google. And this brings us to our free gift to our attendees as a thank you for attending our webinar. So before this webinar started, we actually created custom reports for every single one of our attendees based on the domain name that you signed up with. But if you'd like a different report for a different domain, we can send that to you. Just request it from us. So I'm going to launch a poll. If you'd like us to send you your own custom performance report, just indicate your selection on the screen. Select yes if you'd like it for us to send it to you. We've already generated it, so we'll send it to you pretty quickly. No, if you would like to pass on that. So just take 30 seconds, answer the poll. And if you'd like to meet with a Fastly performance expert who can share with you some of these best practices so you can experience similar results, we're more than happy to set some time with you. So
And George, that's myself, Omid, and Leon are putting ourselves on the spot where folks here want to have a discussion. Absolutely, we'll figure out how to logistically make that happen.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So let's give it a few more seconds before we'll close it out. Um, closing
While
out.
the poll's going, just having been serving the community, the web community from a CDN perspective for 12 odd years, our customers that are using Speed Curve or tools like a Speed Curve to really understand their metrics and know where they can affect uplift. I mean, that pairs very well with the granularity that you have with Fastly to affect the change. But a race car is no good without the dials and the gauges, and that is Speed Curve. So our most successful customer examples and our most sophisticated customers are the ones that are diving in with Speed Curve or tools like it to know, where can we do better? The work they're doing is outstanding.
Absolutely. And speaking of speed curve, I'm going to pass it over to Tammy. I know you just wanted to spend a minute talking
All
about what
right.
you guys have to offer. So passing over to you.
Yeah. Actually, and I want to say, like, as far as mutual appreciation goes, we're a Fastly customer ourselves, so we obviously love what you folks do. So yeah, big fans. Yeah, so obviously we would love it if people wanted to start a free speed curve trial, and I believe a poll is going to pop up that lets you let us know if you would like to start a kind of no strings attached trial, no credit cards or anything like that. And you'll get to, with your trial, it's full featured. So you get to track core web vitals and create competitive benchmarking dashboards. And if you try our RUM, you can do things like create your own correlation charts that show the impact of what kind of, well, like the relationship between your performance metrics and other metrics like bounce rate and conversion rate and all those fun things. So if you would like to start a free trial account, that would be great. But I get that a lot of people, it's like starting a free trial is kind of onerous. It's a bit of a time commitment, and maybe that's not what you want to do at this point, but you're curious. And maybe you just want to chat with Cliff and I. And if so, click that not yet, but I'd like to book a demo option. And we'll talk with you. We'll talk about your performance goals and what your challenges are, and maybe give you a bit of a demo of what Speed Curve can do for you and your own kind of reporting. So we would love to hear from you either way.
Or both. Start a free trial and talk to us. Even better. And
Yeah,
I kind of think
yeah,
one of
it's
the
true.
this time of year, being where a lot of folks are at, if you're in retail, obviously you're pretty locked down. You're starting to focus a lot on holiday. Perfect time to kind of get some free monitoring and another set of eyes on your data, whether that's building your own competitive benchmark so you can have a wall of fame or a wall of shame, whichever way you want to look at it, against you and your competitors. As you go through Thanksgiving, Black Friday, all the different, holiday stuff that we're dealing with right now. Please take us up on it. We'd love nothing more to give you some extra visibility during the most important time of your year for retail, anyway.
Yeah, I've actually seen customers use that. I mean, if they are reporting to performance management on their side, they use that as kind of an audit, like here's how we're doing, here's where we can do better. It gives you both your teams both a sense of assurance and also what's our path, what's our trajectory, what are we going to be working on next quarter or the quarter after. Even just getting a snapshot in time of how that's going, especially going into the holidays, is a boon to an organization. That's really cool. You guys are doing that.
Yep, absolutely.
So yeah, that's bringing us up on time. So I want to say thank you to all of our attendees for joining. A big thank you to our Fastly experts, as well as our special guests from SpeedCurve, Cliff and Tammy, for joining us today. So we'll reach out to everyone who answered the polls. We appreciate all of you for taking time out of your day to learn more about us, and we hope you have a great rest of your day. Thank you, everybody.
See
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye now.
Bye.
Thanks.